the wrong path.
There was a big study that we spoke about in a recent podcast that came out of the States about how many AI implementations are failing within companies, and the reason is because they're just lobbing some vanilla LLM at the workforce and not integrating it tightly with their processes and all that sort of thing, and that's why it's failing. So what you said completely chimes with that.
And so we've done some work. One of the things we've done is looking at churn for some operators. That's a big challenge, because typically what we found is a lot of the data around churn statistics and how we retrieve that data is very specific to that particular customer, right?
Right.
And then, of course, when you want to measure the benefit of what you've done, are there external factors that have changed, right, that maybe are also impacting that? So it's not always the best kind of scenario to really get measurable benefit. But one of the areas that we've identified is actually when we look at network operations centers, right, NOCs, they always have really well-structured processes, because these are the guys who are getting woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning, as mentioned earlier, and having to go, oh dear, I try not to use expletives, because I'll get into trouble.
We don't mind them on the pod.
I know you don't. But
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast on an unseasonably warm day. It's like 25 degrees in London, and we're in late September, so enjoy it while it lasts before we get into the next 6 months of gloom and misery. Delighted to say that we've got a guest with us today, Simon from Worldwide Technology, WWT to its mates, not to be confused with the wrestling.
I don't think I look like a wrestler.
Yeah, well, maybe over the course of the pod we'll work out what your wrestling name would be. But welcome, Simon. It's great to have you here. And we're just going to get into what your company does, and we're going to talk a little bit, perhaps inevitably, about AI. But as it is relevant to telcos, at least in part. In terms of, I've got a little bit of opening bollocks to cover. First, I should give a shout out to VMO2. I should get that story up, actually, because there was a reason for it. But it was Adam, wasn't it?
Yeah.
From VMO2 came in and gave us a Bakewell tart. And you're thinking, I think I'm going to just search for Bakewell. It's most likely to come up.
He came in and his Bakewell tart was rejected, actually. At the
well, that's it. Yes, unfortunately, he came in earlier than I thought he'd be.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be able to meet him downstairs, but he had to come in early because he had other stuff to do. And they wouldn't let him drop it off, so then he
thought it was anthrax.
Sat in a coffee shop next door, and Ian had to leg it in and take custody of the suspect
very happy
tart.
to do.
So, to anyone, I'll see if I can hold it up without dropping it. Here we are. There's a Bakewell tart. Why is VMO2 going around dropping off Bakewell tarts?
Diversifying outside Telecoms.com.
Offices,
is that what's going on?
I hear you ask. It's because there was a story that we covered earlier on this week. Our headline was VMO2 reckons it has the UK's biggest 5G SA network, written by Nick Wood. And the town of Bakewell in Derbyshire, from which the tart gets its name, was the 500th location covered by their 5G SA network.
Yeah, BT might have something to say about that. But
BT might have something to say about that. Well, over to you. Anyone who wants to clarify. So we get a rare bribe of the week. We don't get them very often these days, do we?
No.
People obviously realise that we're too principled to be bribed. Yes. By the way, for people who are wondering, including my guest, why I say that, I'm obviously only joking. There's nothing transactional about this, except that it would have been rude not to thank them for delivering it. But it just makes me laugh to call them bribes when people give us stuff. So should we have a bit? I brought in knives and forks and everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will.
We don't normally eat on the pod. So,
yeah, I'll tell you what. I won't do it now because I'm not going to be able to multitask. But when someone else is talking, I'll cut some up.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot for that, VMO2. I just tried a bit of the crust. That was very tasty. What else have we been up to, Ian? We went out for dinner earlier on in the week, arranged by Paul from Nokia, who was in the studio last week.
We've been overdosing on Nokia recently.
Yeah, you especially. Yeah, I mean, how many stories did you get out of our trip?
Well, I haven't written them all yet.
Right. So far, how many have you published?
4 or 5.
Right. And I should say, by the way, sat where Paul was last week is Simon's colleague Bushra. Have I got your name right? Welcome. So yes, so we went out and Paul arranged for us to meet. Was it? I keep forgetting the name. White Sky. Why don't you summarise while I'm cutting the Bakewell tart? Why don't you quickly summarise, because it's quite complicated, and I was like, it's all to do with like abstraction layers.
So Paul's on the sort of network infrastructure side of Nokia, which does various things, including fixed broadband infrastructure, as well as their sort of optical and internet protocol stuff. And as part of that, they do sort of Ethernet switches for use in data center connectivity,
right,
inside rather than between them, where you'd use optical. And so he's been quite good at facilitating meetings with some of the people they deal with in that area.
He has, and it was through him that we met Nscale.
We met Nscale. We had
through him and Elena, who was out. Hi, Elena.
Now.
The person who, if you don't know, does our Christmas quiz, and hopefully will again this year.
Yeah, so if people don't know who Nscale is, they're a UK company that's sort of positioning themselves as a cloud, an AI cloud, I guess, for different target markets than would be served by the hyperscalers, would be their pitch. But selling sort of GPU as a service.
And they were just involved in something that we might touch on later.
And they've got a data center up in Stavanger, is it? I think they've got one up in the sort of near
Lapland,
north of Norway, and then they're involved in this announcement that we might talk about as well this week about the UK. But they're a UK company, and then White Sky is they're more on the software side. They're kind of positioning themselves as a cloud platform that you might use as an alternative to things like sort of VMware, Nutanix, but they're quite a small company. They're, I think, 25 people, they were saying.
Right.
Belgium-based.
And we met, what was it, the CEO and the CTO?
Yeah.
Can you remember their names?
Yeah, Hans and Geert.
And Geert, who looks just like Will Ferrell.
He does look quite a lot like Will Ferrell.
And
yes.
I asked him about it, and he said he gets it all the time, so it's not just me.
And they're kind of, again, they're quite sort of, I guess they see some opportunity at the moment because there's a lot of talk about, which again we'll probably end up talking about later, about sovereignty, sovereign AI and sovereign cloud.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for Paul and Elena for introducing us to people like that, because we wouldn't necessarily encounter them otherwise.
Yeah.
And they were good lads. Thanks a lot for the dinner. It's good fun. Good chat.
What do those expressions mean? I mean, there's they sort of get thrown around quite a lot, but there's quite a lot of bullshit attached to it, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, attached to what?
The claims of sovereignty.
Oh, I see. Yes, we had a good chat about that, and what?
Let's have a sovereign cloud.
Yeah, that might be something
based entirely on Microsoft.
Yeah, and run by Microsoft.
Yeah.
And as I joked, Amazon opened up, AWS opened up a European office to say that they're all terribly sort of sovereign and all that sort of thing. But it's all Amazon people. It's just that the one in charge of it happened to be an Amazon person who's a German woman.
Yeah.
And
it's obviously very controversial.
Make it German, does it?
There's the people commenting on it on LinkedIn at the moment about how sovereign can it be when underlying technologies are provided by US companies.
Indeed.
I think Zoe Kleinerman, actually, the BBC even asked that question of Satya Nadella when she did her sort of one-on-one with him.
What, recently when all the announcements were
this
going
week, So anyway, White Sky's like in that area. It's like a startup. Obviously, it's 25 people.
Yeah.
There's that. No one ever gets sacked for buying IBM thing that you'd throw at them, I guess, for why is someone going to use you as opposed to
a startup as opposed to
and there's obviously a lot that they wouldn't be able to do that you get through Microsoft, but they're kind of in that area, and they're kind of very much working with telcos. I don't think I'm revealing anything confidential by saying that they've been working a bit with American Mobile in Latin America,
right,
and MTN in Africa.
I don't remember them explicitly saying, for God's sake, don't mention that on the pod.
Yeah. But anyway, there'll be more.
I did reassure them that I wouldn't remember anything they said, which I don't know if they took that as a positive.
Well, I'm supposed to be speaking to them again for a more sort of deep dive in about a week. So
cool. All right. Well, I look forward to keeping in touch.
But it's good to.
By the way, bit of feedback for VMO2. This Bakewell tart was very crumbly and difficult to cut. It's not very podcast friendly, Adam. But I have cut some now. Who fancies some now? Oh, look, that one's ended. Oh, like. Yeah, you fancy some, Pierre? Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how well it's going to go with my
with your beer,
my can of drink. Yeah, at the moment, but
What
So
were
I might
we saying?
just-
Any demand for Bakewell tart? No.
I might just nurse it for a bit and then
Right.
Provide
I'll take
some
this one
feedback
that's
later.
particularly mangled. Simon, if you want, there's a spare one. Otherwise,
Oh, thank you.
We'll chuck it. And this is just going to have to be there, getting in my way for the rest of it. Yeah. So it turns out tarts and pods don't mix.
no.
So there we are. Right. That's quite
I
enough.
say tarts and something else then don't mix, but yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Actually, I should one other thing. I was explaining to Simon why we have all these beers sitting around on the floor, because often people bring in a bit like Bjorn did last week, bring in some scary beers that we
Yes.
don't think we should drink, or we'll make even bigger idiots of ourselves than we normally do. But I just found this one from the archives that, appropriate enough, is called Boston Bakewell. I'm thinking someone must have brought it over from the States. If you're a listener and a former guest who brought this over, remind me who you are. I think it was quite a while ago, because it says best before May 23, so quite a while ago. But it's called Boston Bakewell. It calls itself a cherry, chocolate and almond milk stout. And among the ingredients are these varieties of just barley. This is before we even get into hops. Maris Otter, Cara Munich Type 2, biscuit, brown chocolate, Carafa Special Type 3, and then oats that aren't regular oats, they're brackets torrified. So if anyone knows what any of that shit means, then write in or whatever. But we're not going to drink it because it's 2.5 years out of date.
I don't understand how it's 2.5 years out of
No, I
date,
don't
but
understand that either. But we have got some quite old beers
You've
there.
been
We obviously
hoarding
need
beer.
a purge. We need a purge.
yeah.
Right. Okay. Pro Simons, be very patient while we just talk shit. So we have to get it out of our system. It enables us to be more dialed in and serious once we've purged these random thoughts from our mind. I think I'm just going to throw the ball straight to you, Simon. Why don't you just tee up what WWT does, what you do there, and then we'll get into talking about some other industry chat.
Sure. So thanks for inviting me.
I'm going to eat some Bakewell tart while you're doing that.
And I'm going to watch jealously because I can't talk and eat because it'll just go everywhere. So yes, thank you, Simon Dumbleton. I'm the European CTO for our global service provider practice at WWT. We are a system integrator, and the global service provider practice works with telcos, so service providers, media, gaming companies like Unreal, but also one of the big things that we do is we work on a lot of the big kind of AI factories as well, so building huge AI infrastructure. So
What's an AI factory? Is that a data center?
it's a big data center hosting thousands of
So it's the ones
GPUs.
that we hear a lot about where you've just got billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of investment going into them, and one of the things that is enriching NVIDIA especially so much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, if we can get a slice of that pie, we're more than happy, right? So, and I think that definitely requires some specialist skills, as we'll talk about a little bit later. But essentially what we do is, a lot of what you were talking about, in terms of what Nokia do. If I'm working with a telco, I can be having a conversation 1 minute about a cloud data center, private cloud data center. I could be next minute talking about what's the evolution, what are they going to do about MPLS? Are they thinking about, segment routing? Are they thinking about convergence of IP plus optical, all that kind of stuff? And then the next day, I could be talking to somebody about AI, and what that means for them.
I guess being an SI, you do have to have a sort of broad range of competence because you don't know what a given customer's going to want to dig into.
Exactly. I mean, the team that I have is quite broad. We have specialisms, across networking, cloud, and so on, and naturally AI.
And is telecoms your roots?
So yes, I won't go into how many years, but we discussed that earlier. We're similar ages, so you can imagine how.
So you're
how
an
many
old
years. Yes. Unfortunately, there comes to a time in your career where you start realizing that everyone who's being recruited is younger than you.
Yeah.
And that's
including your colleague in the room here.
My lovely young colleague in the room, yes, who looks a hell of a lot younger than me as well.
But yeah, I think you're 1 year younger than me, so you're 1 year less gittish than I am. So that's something, if that's any consolation.
I'll take it. I'll take whatever I can get at these.
So in your many years of professional life, you've worked on the telco side, have you?
Yes, but I've worked for equipment providers selling into telcos. I've worked for telcos as well. And so I think that it's an interesting perspective when you've worked for both. And also when you've had operational responsibility in a telco to then come back to being the person who's trying to sell to a telco. You really understand, what keeps people awake at night. Because quite frankly, one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and every career move I've made through my career, has always been focused on what can I learn? What can I learn next? So, when I worked for the company that you just mentioned, one of the biggest things was actually operations, right? I do not want to be called up at 2:00 in the morning because the network's not working.
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's not what anyone wants. And then when you start selling and designing solutions for those customers, that's always at the back of your mind, how can we actually improve things? How can we make sure that people don't get called out?
It must be almost unique selling technology into telcos in so much as the jeopardy of something going wrong and the network going down so high that whereas I imagine in other industries they can perhaps roll the dice a little bit more or just install something in the middle of the night when nothing's going on. It's a 24/7 thing for them, isn't it? So there's a high level of I guess quality assurance or something that goes into it.
Exactly, and I think one of the things we have to recognise, right, is it's highly regulated.
Yeah.
So if you do something in the middle of the night and it takes the network down, and then it takes you a long time to recover, that has regulatory implications.
Right.
But not just that, people are using this for emergency services.
Yeah.
Indeed.
That's when the press usually gets hold of a story, isn't it? Like, you couldn't phone emergency services because BT had some big
human
pop-up.
interest thing. Yeah.
And so, if you think about it with that lens, it kind of brings a different perspective that maybe you weren't thinking about.
Do you guys get involved in, if they are, for instance, doing like a vendor swap or something? This is not in the AI area at all, but they're moving out. And we know that there's a thing going on at the moment for, reasons that certain vendors are untrusted. But would you be involved in those sorts of projects where they need people to help them move from one system to another? And
yes.
it is a big SI kind of.
We do a lot of work with some of the big telcos around technology swaps.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, swapping, Nokia for Ericsson and things like that, but certainly more around the IT infrastructure. So, if they're going from one particular software cloud to another software cloud,
right,
one switching technology to another one, to a different vendor and so on, we get involved in a lot of those.
That's the thing we always keep hearing is, especially in the cloud, if you go from one platform to another, like try and move from AWS to Microsoft Azure or something, it's like very challenging, and there's a lot that can go wrong, and there's not always the equivalent services on the other side that you need.
I think, my expertise is more on the private cloud side, but with the public clouds, it's even harder.
Yeah.
Because, if you put something in the public cloud, then to get the most out of the public cloud, you want to use native services. Those native services, by default, kind of lock you in to that environment, right? So if you're using Azure native services and you want to port to AWS, you've got to reinvent the wheel, right? Or if you want to take it from Azure and bring it back on-prem, then, and actually it ties us into a little bit about AI. So a lot of our own internal AI was initially developed on Azure.
Yeah.
And we're repatriating that internally because of cost and, and all the investment we've made in things like NVIDIA and AMD and other infrastructure. And of course that has to be re-architected to bring it back. So that causes it's almost like, look, learn from the lessons that we've learned, don't make the same mistakes, and here's how we can help you.
So if I've understood what you're saying correctly, are you saying it's a mistake to be over-dependent on the public cloud?
That's a nice question to put me on the spot.
By the way, you can plead the fifth anytime you want. I'm not trying to back you into a corner. I'm just active listening.
I think
because that's what I took from what you said, but I want to make sure I understood it correctly.
It depends on the use case and the scale. So when you look at the scale of our organisation and how much the use of those tools that we developed for AI were being consumed in Azure, then that consumption outstripped the forecast of where we thought they would be. Then yes, it kind of makes more business
It's a
sense to bring it back.
case-by-case sort of thing.
And you need to look at it case by case, because obviously those public cloud companies, they've invested a lot of money in those native services, which means that actually you can prototype services really quickly. But then you might think, based on this and based on our experience, we know in a year's time we're going to be outstripping what we can afford to pay. So let's bring it back.
Yeah. And I think clever public cloud providers, I think we've given the most credit historically to Microsoft on this. Although I think more recently at TTW we thought Google was talking a reasonably good game. But Microsoft was always quite grown up about the hybrid cloud thing and saying, look, we're not going to try and get you to go all in. We're very, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to have your bespoke hybrid sort of solution, which I think is sensible. But
I think the thing at DTW was more Google talking about its kind of telco pitch,
right? Okay,
which they'd been a bit less visible for a while because you had those big mega announcements with Microsoft and AT&T and AWS and Telefonica or whoever it is.
And they're definitely the distant third in
Google
terms of
been,
market share among the big public cloud
market share anyway, but they'd also not really been sort of in the mix as much, it seemed, on the telco side. And then they had a big sort of announcement, I think, with Ericsson talking about doing a 5G core offer on Google sort of GCP. So that's where they sort of come out of the
So that's relevant to what I know is one of the things that you're most keen to talk about, Simon, which is telcos and AI.
Yes.
And one of the things that I thought a little sort of revelation to me, actually chatting to Google Cloud Digital Transformation World in Copenhagen, was just thinking, oh God, of the big 3 public cloud providers, they're the only one that wholly own their own LLM, their own major LLM. So I superficially thought that must put them at some kind of competitive advantage in this AI-obsessed world we're in now. But what do you think, Simon? Do you think, from a telecoms point of view, do you think we're talking too much about AI? We're too obsessed with it? Do you think telcos need to invest on the scale that lots of other industries are, or can they afford to just wait and see how things play out a bit? What's your big picture view on telcos and AI?
So our view, and across WWT, really is we need to be smart about how we invest. If we jump because we've got this big fear because of the hype, we've got this fear of missing out. We love that FOMO acronym, right? If we have that fear and we go and jump and we invest a load of money and then we don't deliver on it, it's going to be another one of these kind of flaky things that we've invested in and never really paid ourselves back.
The bottom of the hype curve,
the top of disillusionment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one of the things that we look at is, as well, in reality, and if we focus on the UK, if you look across a lot of the UK networks, the key is a lot of the networks can't really host big AI clusters, because if we look at the way the networks have evolved, they've evolved from converting old exchange sites to become data centers, and the power and cooling capabilities of those environments just isn't there.
Right.
So...
And the cooling, especially, I would have thought, is just baked in, to use an appropriate term, is just baked into the architecture.
Exactly. So the big architectures are basically fully integrated with water cooling. Well, it's a hybrid of some air and water, but it's about 80 to 90% of the rack is water cooled.
So it's a huge investment for them to be able to get there if they wanted to do it, basically.
I mean, UK buildings on the whole, UK houses are designed to keep heat in, aren't they?
Exactly.
As we experience on the rare occasions it's really warm here, suddenly our houses suck.
Like this room.
Well, that's true.
It's quite warm.
This room is like that. Unfortunately, it looks like there's vents, but we don't
get when we emerge from the room at the end, everybody's drenched in sweat. and
I'll have lost a few pounds even more.
Yeah, no, it does get like that. But anyway, sorry. So you were saying the UK infrastructure is not optimised for that sort of thing.
The telco.
So from a telco perspective, I think the announcements that we've had this week, are quite timely because, we're seeing this massive investment coming.
How many billions was it total?
Well, I got confused with the numbers because the UK government number was about 30 billion, but
no,
I think
it was way more.
No, the UK government put out a number of 13 billion.
No, but Pierre's also right. It did grow. There was another announcement that was like 150 billion.
That covered a lot of stuff that wasn't to do specifically with the AI side of things.
Okay, fair enough.
But
Blackstone,
Microsoft,
was it? Tons of money from Blackstone. I don't even know what they're doing.
There are various other things going on, but Microsoft themselves had an announcement that they were investing 30. So it's like, well...
I think the challenge is, right, there's several announcents have happened this week. And we kind of need to...
isn't it?
Because Blackstone, is an AI data center as well, right? So there's a lot of these things going on.
Suddenly this company's just chucking 70 billion at us. I don't know much about them.
It's a bit scary, isn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, sorry, where were we on that?
Well, it's good in the end, right? I mean...
Lot of jobs. Is it a thing that telco should be doing, really? Because especially with regard to what's gone on this week and like the announcements that Microsoft's going to be doing a lot. We've got this company Nscale, I think we've already mentioned, that's involved. You've got some other players in the mix. It's not a huge geographical area, the UK market, so some of those concerns about things like latency and how many facilities you need are maybe not as great as they would be in Russia or
where are they going to
somewhere with landmass? So is it an area that, like, the idea? I mean, I'm not saying telcos shouldn't take advantage of AI, which they are doing. They're all developing their own sort of chatbots, it seems, or doing, what do you call it, fine tuning of large language models to be able to have that capability, and they're involved in other areas. But in terms of them actually investing in GPUs and I'm not really convinced that's an area that they should be in. I don't know.
I love the skepticism because I think it's right. Our approach is very much, if you're going to invest, it needs to have tangible ROI. And we have use cases and we've implemented some things, and I can touch on those where we've really delivered that tangible ROI. If you can do that in a measurable, incremental manner, then you can build towards that long-term strategy of actually this is where we want to go, and potentially this is what we want to do. And we want sovereignty of our data, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a key concern, especially for a country like ours.
And sorry to butt in, but we were talking about this before. What does sovereignty mean?
So sovereignty to me,
I keep asking you the shitty questions.
Yeah, which is fine. That's why I'm here, right? And
it's not deliberate. I'm not trying to be a dick.
So for me, it is about the data about you and I, right? Because we're all subscribers. Our data needs to remain sort of protected, and I think it's well known, right, that Microsoft, there was a lawyer from Microsoft recently in a European court admitted that they can't guarantee sovereignty of the data, right, because of the US Cloud Act.
The Cloud Act's a big thing, yeah.
So if you're hosting data in Microsoft, in Google, in AWS or Oracle, there's no guarantee to sovereignty.
Yeah.
So I think there are aspects where the likes of Nscale, because it's a UK company, can give that sovereignty. But also I think there are people, like BT, Vodafone 3 now, and VMO2, where they all have government contracts, right?
Yeah.
And they need to think about, okay, do we want to be able to apply AI to those kind of environments, and what do we do, and what does that mean?
Yeah, totally. Because I'll just say quickly to clarify. So sovereignty on one level could mean the physical location of the infrastructure. On another level, it could be the nationality of the owner of the infrastructure or the software that runs on top of it. And then you just pointed out another layer, which is the AI, which is all American as well. So I suppose a real European sovereign thing would just be like Nscale kit and using Mistral AI or something like that. It gets quite in the weeds.
Well,
sorry, what are you going to say?
That's how the conversation's evolved, though, I think, because what sovereignty used to mean was the data has to be stored locally. That was what it was for a long time.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Howard Watson actually about this at MWC, Howard Watson from BT, where he was saying there's now a push for the actual operators of the clouds to be European. So you have this thing called Bleu in France, for instance, which is a joint venture between Orange and...
How's that, Pierre? Was that close?
Did I nail it?
I thought you were saying like blah, blah, blah. I was confused.
No,
Even the color blue. Right.
It's between Orange and Capgemini.
yeah.
A joint venture which is designed to sort of overcome some of those concerns about sovereignty, that in the past it would just be a Microsoft data center in France. Now it has to be sort of have French stakeholders. But the complexity, the paradox is that the technology providers are still like US ones. So the Blur cloud is basically powered by Microsoft. And if you ask Orange, they'll come back and they'll basically say it's an enablement of Microsoft stack. And they came out with this blog, I remember, a few weeks ago, Brad Smith, who's the president, sort of saying, I mean, he didn't quite put it this way, but it was essentially saying what they do in the event of a presidential order that you're not allowed to serve Europe anymore, which has obviously been an issue because of all the sort of bullying and the threats that come out of the current US administration about its treatment of, Europe's treatment of US companies.
Yeah, like if Starmer hadn't just sucked up to him enough, he might have just
What
gone,
do we do in the event of legal intervention that means we can't operate in Europe anymore? And they had these weird things in there, like we'll leave copies of our source code in a Swiss vault.
I know.
And it's like
very,
it's
spy movie.
And it's like, well, this is, by the way, his description of how they deal with it for a sovereign cloud. I mean, that doesn't sound like what some people want. Hence, I think this is why you've got these smaller companies. I mean, I'm not saying N scale because I think they're partnering with a lot of those guys. They probably wouldn't.
They are. They were part of the big video announcement.
But people who are startups are prepared to be a bit punchier. I've noticed recently on LinkedIn about some of these deals that are being announced with US technology companies, and is it really sovereignty? And as I say, I think it was nice to hear a mainstream journalist like Zoe Kleinerman, who's pretty good actually, sort of raising the topic with Satya Nadella. I don't know if she got a very good answer from him about it. I think he
I don't know if you remember our Teams chat this week where I was watching a subsea cable video, learning because we had guests on who are into that. So, but this time was like more in depth, and the hacking, like mechanical hacking of subsea cable, is a real thing.
Yeah.
So presumably,
we wanted you to do a special on submarines.
No, yeah. It's just that makes sense now that you don't want your data to travel across.
That'd be a filming challenge.
Yeah, no. I asked James Cameron.
But on the other hand, I guess we don't have the capability in Europe to do this. This is the problem. We don't have the hyperscalers are all US. We don't have an NVIDIA. I mean, the NVIDIA for me is almost more of an issue, I think, than the hyperscalers now because the whole AI conversation still seems to be about NVIDIA GPUs. For a long time you had concerns about Intel as the only option in the CPU world, and that's become a little bit more diverse now. The AMD's got a bigger market share. ARM seems to be emerging as a opportunity in some environments.
And AMD is pretty close to as competent as NVIDIA when it comes to GPUs in a sort of a normal computing environment.
Yeah.
Because they bought this company ATI about 20 years ago or something.
Yeah.
But they're obviously nowhere near them in terms of data centers.
But I think a lot of that's to do with and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the kind of ecosystem you build around it, the fact that, for a long time it was like everything's x86 based. People are used to working with Intel. You got that relationship with Windows, and it was all very kind of nicely joined together, that sort of integration job. And NVIDIA's sort of in a similar position, it seems, with CUDA. They're just sort of ahead of the game on.
I think that's, if you look at one of the recent, I think it was the one in Paris, GTC Paris, Jensen talked a lot about the software stack, as a differentiator for NVIDIA. And it's all about, at the end of the day, how can we accelerate consumption of GPUs, right? And what he talks about, he doesn't always talk about AI. There's a big focus on AI because that's what's gaining all of the market traction and everything at the moment. But he also talks quite holistically about accelerated compute.
Yeah.
So it could just be, okay, right now, AI. It could be another use case is, computational fluid dynamics, right? I mean, that's...
It was crypto before.
And crypto. It could be whatever next, right?
Biomedical,
it could be,
like protein folding, all that sort of thing.
Could be quantum next, right? Because what I love is, was it 6 months ago, he came out and said, I don't believe anything in quantum, and he challenged the leaders of all these quantum companies to come and talk to him.
I'm with him on that. I'm a quantum skeptic.
I don't think he is anymore, though.
Oh, is he?
Well,
I don't think qubits works the same as GPUs.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. But, he has launched an investment on the east coast of the States, right?
Yeah.
Around Boston area, I think, to invest in quantum computing. They launched Q2Q, right,
Yeah.
which is a means to use GPUs to kind of simulate a quantum environment and so on. So, I think one of the things that's quite interesting is if you compare NVIDIA and AMD is, the two CEOs are really, really smart people and they're related.
What?
Are they?
Yeah, they're cousins.
No, I didn't know. I didn't even know that.
Linda-
That's crazy.
Lisa Su.
Lisa
Sue, yeah.
Sue.
I didn't know they were cousins.
Lisa Sue's a cousin of Jensen Huang. Well, goddamn.
That shouldn't be allowed. I have
Imagine,
to say.
imagine being another cousin and be like, "No, I'm not a billionaire."
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. It's like that other. That's like that other Oasis brother.
Yeah.
Who's just a waste of space.
I'm just a heart surgeon.
Well, that's very nice of you to call him a waste of space.
Well, I
because
think
he's
he,
not in
I think he
Oasis.
keeps getting arrested, doesn't he?
Oh.
To be fair.
Wait.
Sorry, don't sue me if I got that wrong.
Wait, there's another Gallagher brother.
Dave Oasis or whatever your name is.
There's a guy who's not part of the band, an older
Yeah.
brother, I think.
He's a Gallagher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't know this. Oh.
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, I'm totally out of my depth and probably being slanderous already, so I'm going to shut up.
They'll be
but yeah,
listening,
that is,
Scott, and they'll be getting in touch.
Liam, we're coming on you. You got a nerve.
Biblical.
I wasn't ready to try and do a Liam Gallagher impression there at
It
all.
wasn't too bad. I've seen you do worse ones.
It's more the mank body language sort of thing.
Tilt your head back a little.
Yeah, you got to be on. What was I saying? Where were we? Oh yes. So yeah, you were mentioning we were talking about the big GPU people. By the way, I mean I know from my career past, Jensen's been talking about GPUs for a very long time. So I'm not that anyone's suggesting it, but it's not like he just suddenly fluked it in the last few years. They've been investing a hell of a lot of time and effort into this effort, and they've tried other stuff. They tried a mobile chip called Tegra, which didn't take off, and so they've tried lots of things. And then he's just hit the jackpot in the last few years, hasn't he?
He has. He's still got the small chips, right? He's got the Jetson Nano and all this kind of stuff, which I know they've been looking at putting in cars, right, for AI in cars.
Well, they also have
like
something I think that's more appropriate for mobile base stations, where they're saying if you do want to do AI RAM but emphasise the RAM more than the AI, then there's this kind of form factor that's not,
exactly.
it's not as kind of computationally intensive.
in theory, accelerate all the L1 stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Tesla uses AMD, I think. Yeah.
And one other thing that worth mentioning, sorry, another tangent. This is what you get on this podcast, especially after we had a couple of beers. There is a deal that we just it was announced yesterday, but we just wrote about it today, which is that Nvidia is investing $5 billion into Intel, which certainly, even as recently as 5 years ago, certainly 10 or 20 years ago, would have been inconceivable because they were arch competitors. And certainly Jensen used to just always be slagging them off in public. He's always had this quite sort of spiky, disruptor sort of public image. And he wears that denim, that leather jacket the whole time, doesn't he?
Well, I mean, when I've heard him talk about CPUs, his thing's always been to sort of, because the idea with CPUs is the Moore's Law association, isn't it? That you put more transistors on. I don't know what the exact rule is. Every 18 months it doubles or whatever.
Yeah, that was the historical law.
And it keeps and his whole thing seems to have been to sort of criticise that as being dead, and therefore we need to move to a completely new type of platform, which is the GPU, and then, as you were saying, position that as a kind of general purpose successor to CPUs for an AI kind of world where you've got an anchor CPU that's just doing some of your basic easy stuff that it wouldn't make sense to put a GPU on.
Keeping things tidy.
But the quantum, AI, RAN acceleration, bunch of other stuff can be done by the GPU. That seems to be his thing. But
and he's been proven right in the current generative AI.
The Intel deal's interesting because, and it's not really that telecom related, but there is telecom stuff. But I just find it, because they had their own AI story, didn't they? Intel, their attempts to do a range of chips, of AI chips, and it's been criticised, and it's had problems, and obviously that market's still dominated by Nvidia. But it almost implies they're pulling away from that. The fact that they've taken this investment, and I think as the details of the agreement that they're going to integrate some of the GPU stuff into their products, and at the same time,
and they talk about chiplets.
And the same time, Nvidia puts some x86 into what it's doing is essentially how it's working.
Yeah, so I think they're talking about SoC, system on chips, which is what we associate that people like Qualcomm make. That in my understanding, when I first learned about system on chips, I used to work at a title called Hexus, where we were talking more about gaming PCs, so it was like motherboards and all that. And so you got a motherboard, and you got a graphics card, and you got a CPU, and you got the RAM, and they're all different bits of the motherboard. And a system on chip, an SoC, basically has all that silicon on one die, one bit of silicon, but you got different zones.
It's pretty commonplace now.
It's pretty commonplace, and I think
they did with the M1.
I mean, even the stuff that Intel pitches as, they get sort of talked about as general purpose processors for use in virtual RAM. They're system on chips, really. They've got inbuilt acceleration with whatever they call it. They're sort of VRAM stuff, and so
and Intel's always had some degree of inbuilt graphics processing, but it's always been a bit shit. Yeah. So you get it on like an entry level.
What was the name of it again?
I can't remember if it even had much of a brand. It would just be.
Oh wait, I remember this.
And it's always a bit rubbish, but it'll be all right if you just want a basic like Chromebook type of thing, something that where you're not going to be doing much gaming, much graphic intensive stuff. And anyway, just to quickly finish off, what this seems to be, and what I was chatting to my colleague Andrew about, it seems to set the scene for a sort of intermediate form factor. You're still going to get like gaming PCs with graphics cards in, and high-end gaming laptops, and that's. This is just on the consumer side, obviously, but this does apply in a different way to the data center. But then you're going to get a type of chip, which is an SoC, but with much better baked-in graphics than we're used to from like CPU makers in the past.
But it's not so different from like what NVIDIA already offers with like Grace Blackwell, which is that's a CPU,
that's got a CPU,
GPU.
Yeah.
It's just.
So I think they're going to get even more into it.
To me, the thing I think about when I sort of think about how it might apply in the RAM, for instance, is, or just even more generally than that, is it just seems like Intel's that concern about GPU competition and it's all NVIDIA. This sounds like it's just going to make that even worse. It's even more of an AMD versus NVIDIA thing. And then maybe it's not such a great thing for ARM either, because NVIDIA's very much been pushing sort of its Grace offer as a kind of CPU alternative to x86. And now all of a sudden they're an investor in Intel and they have more of an interest on the x86 side. So it's... And I don't think it addresses a lot of the underlying problems that Intel has either, by the way. I mean, it obviously means they've got a buffer.
Certainly not on the foundry side, because I don't think there was a foundry announcement.
They still had a $19 billion net loss last year. They've still got all these challenges that they haven't really addressed. This gives them a buffer, I guess. And
NVIDIA's bought some shares.
But
well done. Sorry, were you going to say something, Simon?
It's fine. Yeah, I think for the large-scale AI stuff, NVIDIA will keep up with I think it's going to go to Vera next, right?
Right.
So from Grace to Vera, and
is that the next CPU?
I think so. And next,
I didn't know that.
Will be Rubin. I think is Vera.
And these are all like famous scientists, aren't they?
Yeah.
Vera Rubin is the next thing. Okay.
I think. I'm trying to recall. But yeah, so they're definitely keeping up with the ARM-based.
Yeah.
Because Grace, I think, was one of the first ARM v9. CPUs.
Yeah.
The challenge is, of course, right, as we saw with Apple, and Apple was still probably the only people who have done mass wholesale shifts from different CPU architectures, right? They went from PowerPC to Intel, from Intel to ARM.
Yeah.
And they made it so easy for consumers, right? Because they just embedded Rosetta 2 to handle that. But, other people aren't going to do that, right? So you're still going to have to have that need for x86.
Yeah.
And, other things we can build for ARM and make the most out of that,
Yes, here's a quote from Jensen in the announcement. He said, AI is powering, you got to get past the initial just total self-aggrandizing part of it. AI is powering a new industrial revolution and reinventing every layer of the computing stack, from silicon to systems to software. At the heart of this reinvention is NVIDIA's CUDA architecture. This historic collaboration tightly couples NVIDIA's AI and accelerated computing stack with Intel's CPUs and the vast x86 ecosystem, a fusion of two world-class platforms, blah, 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 and we're going to take on the world.
Show me the money.
And so, yeah, that is interesting when you look at it from a platform rather than a silicon point of view.
It is, but... like the RAN side of it, and I think we were talking about AI RAN earlier, and AI RAN as it's pitched by NVIDIA, which is about sort of using GPUs and their platform to do both some of the RAN compute as well as like AI applications at the edge. This, which overlaps a lot with virtual RAN, the virtual RAN idea of using sort of general purpose processors as opposed to ASICs and custom silicon to do your kind of RAN. This to me seems slightly awkward for that, because one of the efforts of the telcos has been to get other platforms in there to try and diversify away a bit from x86 and to make ARM a bigger deal in that world, and not for virtual RAN to just be based on Intel and a bit of AMD, and even AMD is not really very present at the moment. And this all of a sudden now is, it's great in a way if it helps Intel to address some of its issues and stay there, but you're still in a world where Intel's like potentially 100% of virtual RAN. And so I haven't written about it, by the way, or even looked at this very much, because it was only a couple of days ago.
25%, by the way.
Yeah, Intel's did. And interesting, I was just looking up AMD's share price, and immediately on the announcement of this thing, it fell off by about 7 or 8%, but it's already recovered nearly all of that. So I think you got that initial like, oh shit, this looks like bad news for AMD, and then when investors have had a day to think it over, they're like, oh no, maybe it's
they get a bit crazy and start going buy,
Yeah,
all those pits,
get like the end of trading places. Exactly, that's the only reference we've got. Showing our age. So
I love that movie.
You know that doesn't exist anymore, right?
What, that going into the trading floor and waving bits of paper around? I know, what a shame. It's so dramatic. No, it's
much
all
better than computers doing it.
It's all bloody AI these days, isn't it? So actually, bring it back, Simon. Sort of retrieving this tangent. As you can imagine, we've been doing this for years. I've had to learn that as a skill set. Much of a
tangent. It was
not at all. Not at all. No, I wasn't saying it was, and I certainly wasn't saying it was a bad tangent. But so we're talking a lot about NVIDIA, and we were talking about it in a telecoms context. And I know from our chat beforehand, you got some thoughts on the investment environment and a lot of the investments going into NVIDIA GPU. So perhaps we can get back onto that and just give us your thoughts on telcos. Do they need to be investing as heavily as some people are in all this infrastructure and all these GPUs?
So absolutely, and I think having been there, right, in the operator space, I tend to try and make sure that I don't oversell things, because once you've been in the industry for 30 odd years, right? It's that long.
Cat's out of the bag now.
Yeah, you can't tell stories, right, that are later found out to be false, because you've lost your credibility and all that trust is gone, and then it's impossible to rebuild it. So the thing for me is, how can we make it smart, right? How can we make it so that if we're going to do something, that it actually has a real benefit? And a lot of that just starts with, at WWT, we have this kind of 3-phase approach that we talk about, which is studio, foundry, factory. And I'll explain a little bit of that, because otherwise it doesn't really make any sense. So studio is all about looking at data. What is the data that you've got? Does it make sense? Many people talk about, with AI, get the right data, make sure your data's accurate before you put it in. I think a lot of what we talk about is that's good, but what are the business processes that you've got around that data as well? Because if you don't have really well-structured business processes, and then whatever you do with AI to accelerate that or make decisions around that, if you don't have the right processes, you're going to go down the wrong path.
There was a big study that we spoke about in a recent podcast that came out of the States about how many AI implementations are failing within companies, and the reason is because they're just lobbing some vanilla LLM at the workforce and not integrating it tightly with their processes and all that sort of thing, and that's why it's failing. So what you said completely chimes with that.
And so we've done some work. One of the things we've done is looking at churn for some operators. That's a big challenge, because typically what we found is a lot of the data around churn statistics and how we retrieve that data is very specific to that particular customer, right?
Right.
And then, of course, when you want to measure the benefit of what you've done, are there external factors that have changed, right, that maybe are also impacting that? So it's not always the best kind of scenario to really get measurable benefit. But one of the areas that we've identified is actually when we look at network operations centers, right, NOCs, they always have really well-structured processes, because these are the guys who are getting woken up at 2:00 in the morning, as mentioned earlier, and having to go, oh dear, I try not to use expletives because I'll get into trouble.
We don't mind them on the pod.
I know you don't, but
we actively encourage them.
But how do I solve this? And at 3 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, you need to have really clear guidelines to follow. Yeah. So actually, by looking at what are these guys doing, what are they having to deal with, we can really start looking at the kind of data that they're handling, what's going into the NOC, and how can we manage that. And we've been working with one particular customer recently, very large tier one. And, one of the things we identified was there was a huge amount of noise, huge amount of events getting flagged that were just irrelevant, or actually they were interrelated and should have been correlated. And by it's basic data science, right? Looking at the large volumes of data and looking at what are the patterns, how can we bring that together, and how can we really apply trend analysis and so on to that, then we can really start bringing value.
Is that less of a, because a lot of the AI hype recently has obviously been spawned by generative AI and ChatGPT, but people forget AI has actually been around for a lot longer, and that sounds like more it belongs in the family of predictive AI or whatever. And
so I think AI for us will span everything.
Yeah.
But there's always space, right, for is there basic machine learning that's needed here, right? Especially when we're looking at large volumes of data. I think the thing about generative AI is the fact that it's really good for what we call unstructured data. When I was looking at sort of the standard events that were coming out of platforms that we were managing, a lot of them were really well written for humans to read, but human readable text isn't good for machines, right? They need specific delimiters in fields and things like that.
Unstructured data has been a big challenge for ages. Back when big data was more of a buzzword, I seem to remember one of HP's less successful acquisitions was a UK company called Autonomy, which there's been lots of litigation over the years, and I won't get into that. You what?
And yachts going down.
And yachts going down, and I won't be too unkind about HP because they're flying us over to New York next week. But I think they'd agree that wasn't their finest hour.
We'll criticise them the week after.
Yeah, and we'll flag them off. Once they bought us a bagel and a slice of pizza. But Autonomy, I remember the rationale behind that was all about dealing with unstructured data and all that sort of thing. And now we don't. I don't know. You tell me. You're probably much more likely to hear this, but I don't hear the term big data used very much anymore. It's like it's been superseded by this AI generation. What do you think? You're
right. I don't hear.
I think it's got lumped in with it, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You still hear about data lakes. Yeah. You still hear about data repositories and so on, and where people are lumping all of their data. But big data as a hype term, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's another hype, right?
An expression that used to be used a lot more than it is. It's just all now sort of AI.
Yeah, exactly. And but going back to Gen AI and its applications, absolutely, I think that's where it's really good. It's good at extracting understanding from text.
Yeah,
and then what we can look at is how can we build elements that can interact. So when we look at the way, I think one of the good practices is when we look at the way an organization works with business processes, typically you have a RACI, right? And you have this person is responsible for this one's accountable, responsible, accountable, consulted and informed, right? It's project management.
So it's like a sort of grid of how
who does what
each person is.
Exactly. And we could actually transfer that, because everyone talks about agentic AI, right? We can transfer that and apply the same logic and methodology to agentic AI. So we can say, actually, we'll create an agent whose responsibility is to do this, and another agent whose responsibility is to inform people about this, and so on. And so you can start modeling things on those interactions. What that also means is you can apply security guardrails around each of those agents, around what they should be able to do and what they shouldn't be able to do. So, one of the fundamentals, we talked about earlier is, security concerns about AI and what should it do, what shouldn't it do, what should it have access to. We've got some US-based company that is susceptible to the Cloud Act. Therefore, what data do we want it to have access to, right?
Yeah.
And so on. Well, these are the kind of guardrails and controls that we can put around things because we're looking at it from that business process and encapsulation perspective.
Is that something that telcos are already thinking about when they, if they're doing deals with public cloud providers and they are sort of concerned maybe about things like the Cloud Act, that they would think of using AI in that area?
I think it depends on which area that they're considering. So, my expertise is mostly in the core network and that area rather than the IT area and the associated BSS and customer care stuff. So around the core network area, I think people are generally it's all certainly within the UK. A lot of the stuff that we're dealing with is still on-prem. Dealing with functions and capabilities of the network that are still within the network rather than being exported outside. There is data that goes out to, people like Google, big data lakes and so on. And there's certainly, analysis and stuff that can be done with that. But if you're dealing with areas where you could identify subscribers, I think you need to be very, very careful. Right, because then you're leaning into the areas where, if you put it somewhere that has external access, that's Cloud Act is basically, as far as I perceive, right, it's a GDPR problem.
Yeah, I remember looking at a blog that had been written by some lawyers about the Cloud Act sort of. And I think they described it as like you're caught between a rock and a hard place because you can't be compliant with both. It's like the Cloud Act sort of interferes with GDPR. It's like,
So, I think that helps us, right? Because we want to sell stuff to people to put into the network.
And people look to SIs to help them reconcile some of these sort of conflicts, don't they?
And I think the other challenge that's coming, and of course it's been a lot in the press and it's actually quite good timing recently because DCIT just launched, I think it was only a week or two ago, an updated draft of the Telecom Security Code of Practice, right, for review.
Yeah.
So all of these things are constantly evolving and we need to consider how do we apply all of those controls to everything that we do because you've got access to quite sensitive information.
So the churn stuff, there's kind of being able to figure out why a particular customer might be thinking of leaving, and it's obviously it's quite an individual thing, isn't it? I guess it's quite hard to sort of segment people broadly because people have their own specific circumstances. But is that something where you're seeing? Because I've always thought that seems like one of the big opportunities for AI. I guess if you're trying to ensure that your revenues are stable and you've not got those dips. Is that something that people are already doing and using it to do that?
We've done some work in that area. The biggest challenge for us is every customer's environment is different. So, obviously that then increases the cost, right? So there's always that balance of how much do you want to invest in order to solve a particular problem, and can you be sure you're going to generate a positive ROI? And if you aren't sure, people won't invest, right? So whereas when we start looking at the kind of stuff that I was talking about in terms of network operations, it's a lot more repeatable.
Right.
And therefore, there's a lot more reuse that can be applied, and that leans out that cost curve, and we can apply learnings and experience from one environment to the next. And there's only so many tools in the market, right, in those areas. So the integrations with those tools become more repeatable, more standardized as we go.
Those network operations centers increasingly seem to be like fully automated, don't they? I think they used to sort of have a lot more people involved in that area anyway than they do. But
yes, but I think you were talking earlier about sort of changes to the network, right, and the risks of the changes to the network. So if you're making a change at 2:00 in the morning to the network, there's always somebody.
You've got to have someone there
monitoring, right? Now, there is a common theme with many of the operators that I talk to, which is a strategy to move to autonomous networks, right? Yeah. That's the holy grail. I think we're a fair way away from it, but that's the holy grail of where we want to get to, and that would kind of remove some of that need to have people monitoring, because yes, we'll be able to automatically fix problems, predict problems, and so on.
I remember Scott Petty at Vodafone talking about this a few years ago, that they used to have like hundreds of people involved in NOCs, and now it's gone down to a fairly small number, but you still need people there to sort of supervise and be woken up at 2 a.m. But the rest of it's kind of
A lot goes on at 2 a.m.
automated
in the telecoms world, it seems.
well, it can do.
Well, interestingly, I won't name the operator, but there was a prepaid operator that we did some work with, who had a lot of coastal masts, right, and stuff like that, and they used to see peaks of usage around sort of 2-3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And we think, that was probably boats arriving on shore, bringing things that maybe they shouldn't have been bringing.
Oh wow!
So
that's interesting.
That automation talk brings me on to the stuff that I told you about when we were chatting in advance about my inclination to go straight to Terminator-like dystopian scenarios. I'm not quite going that far, but the more automated something is, yes, in principle, if it's working well, you're sleeping through the night because the automated system's dealing with even unexpected events. But, I can't help but feel very nervous about taking too much direct control and oversight away from people, flawed though they are. It just kind of creeps me out thinking that we're going to be wholly dependent on these machines. And that's where I get a bit dystopian. Do you think I'm...
You're going to be a slave.
Do you think I'm being hysterical?
You're going to be a human slave in the future.
You're going to be, that invokes the Matrix one. Would just be a battery.
You'll be eating porridge.
You might be that already.
Yeah, I might be, yes, exactly. This could be the Matrix. But, excessive extrapolation into science fiction aside, do you think that's a reasonable concern about excessive automation?
I think it's a great question. Now, is it excessive? I think it all depends on who's making the decisions as to how far you go with automation.
Yeah.
Because for me, the approach that I always have taken to automation is, we prove something works first, and once we're comfortable, it's repeatable, that we know it works. Then,
and you're only going to go all in on it once it's been field tested to destruction. Yeah.
And this is why we say actually the NOC is a great example of where to automate, because these are processes that are tried and tested and robust and so on. And
right.
And actually, many of the, if we look at autonomous networks and making changes in the network, one of the things we used to talk about, ITIL terminology, standard versus normal changes, so certain changes you've never made before. So yes, you need to schedule a change window, you need the right level of governance, because you don't know how the change is going to go. But once you've implemented that change several times and it's been successful without deviation, well, actually now you can start thinking, well, that can just be handled without too much forewarning.
Yeah, that all makes sense.
That then becomes perfect target.
And by the way, one thing I don't get freaked out about when people are talking about AI and automation, that sort of thing, is of course, if you can get machines to do very repetitive, low IQ sort of tasks, then great. I mean, that's the history of automation ever since we've had tools, and certainly since the Industrial Revolution, all that sort of thing. So I'm all for that. I guess I'm just interrogating that grey area between a robot arm doing a repetitive pick up and place task to machines. I guess the concept I'm thinking of is making decisions, making higher level decisions. And I don't think they're doing that. I think, on the height curve side of things, people like Sam Altman have been guilty of making the competence of current AI seem higher in a sort of intellectual way than it is, i.e. closer to what's the word? General AI. Yeah, AGI and then super intelligence. But that's the direction of travel, isn't it? Is not just offloading repetitive tasks, but actual decision making, hence agentic. And
all creative stuff.
Creative stuff too.
Which is, I mean, it's not decision making, but it comes from the same area, doesn't it? Potentially.
Yeah, it's that decision. It's if you hit some fork in the road. The reason why.
But if you ask
people our age get the big bucks, Simon, is because people think that when someone's got to make a decision, they're going to be like, okay, I've got this guy's 30 years of experience. One of the reasons I'm paying him is because I back him to make a really informed and probably close to correct decision at a given time. It's just getting a machine to do that.
We had this at the Nokia event that we went to in Oulu, when Tommy Wheater was talking about Manta Ray, which is their network management platform, and how like the original Manta Ray's like level 3 automation, you know, they get that TM4 measurement system that's a bit like what they use in cars. But Manta Ray Autopilot, which is this update they've got, is level 4 automation, and a lot of the decision making is actually done by the machine. So they used it apparently for the recent. It was used during the what do they call it, the Hajj to Mecca. When you get like 1 million Muslims sort of going on pilgrimage, and there's obviously a lot of network traffic. And he said there were like 5 million configurations done in the space of 3 days that were just the decisions were sort of taken by the machines, where previously been a human in the loop. And you kind of think, well, okay, but the very higher level decisions are still being taken. But it's moving up.
That's the direction of travel. Yeah, exactly.
Eventually, there's going to be a point when we're happy to cede more and more to the machine, and the C-suite still exists, but maybe a lot of the stuff that now is done by people in terms of decision making is then handed over to a Manta Ray equivalent or whatever it is. So.
I just want to ethically butt in on something, by the way. We decided to try...
Oh, by the way, that was really good, the Bakewell Tart.
Bakewell Tart was lovely, thanks.
Thank you very much for it.
And it's from the Bakewell Tart shop of Bakewell.
It's proper
so
Bakewell.
They've shipped it in from Bakewell.
It's like having champagne.
And just like Bjorn last week shipped in these Belgian beers from Antwerp, and I thought I'd try the most exotic looking one.
You've got one called Giza.
Which is called Giza Boon, and it's cloudy and green, and it says 100% lambic Malheur, whatever that is. Anyway, I don't like it.
Oh, okay. Well, tough, because I'm not swapping my Leffy with you.
No. I'm so much so. Normally, I just man up and drink it, but I can't.
It's that bad.
It's not. Give it a go. Tell me what you think.
Okay.
It's a challenging drink.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not ideal, is it?
It's like lime.
It's like lime, and it's really bitter and strong. I mean, no offence, Bjorn. Thanks anyway, but I gave it a go. That's a pass on that one. I'm going to go to a wingman.
I reckon what's happened there is they've used AI in their process, and then when it's got to the critical tasting decision,
when it's got
taken by an AI.
When it's got to that good shite fork in the road, it's made the wrong decision. So there's one other thing. If you don't have any other follow-ups on that thread that we were talking about there, Ian, I'm just reminded again of the conversation we had building up to this. There was talk of, for telcos in this AI infrastructure world, there's talk of GPU as a service, which is something we've heard a lot. We heard a lot about that from when we hung out with Nscale, didn't we?
Yeah.
But given this is something that was raised in the build up to this, can you just elaborate on that and why it's a good fit for telcos in your view, if you think that? Don't want to put words in your mouth.
You can put words in my mouth from that one. That's perfect. So I think, when we look at sort of what we've been doing and the use cases we've been implementing, I think a lot of the stuff that we've been doing is really inference. What's termed inference, right? We're leveraging pre-trained models, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there's some ingestion of data, and that could just be, we'll take standard documentation, right, and we'll ingest that. I don't know if you guys are familiar with RAG, right? Retrieval Augmented Generation.
I've heard the expression, but I don't really know what it is.
You can take. So I think the best example is when you're putting something into operation, you want all of the relevant technical documentation really easily accessible, so that if you get an error in the network, you can just go, what do I do with this error on this piece of equipment? And a system will tell you how to fix the problem. So a really good way of solving that is you can stick a chatbot in front of that documentation, right? So you can upload your documents into a vector database. So it just basically gets broken up,
right,
and stored in a vector database. And then with an LLM in front, you can say, I've got this error. What do I do about that? And it will look and retrieve the relevant part from all of that documentation and tell you what to do.
Right. And presumably in time, back to the automation thing, there'll come a time where that conversation's happening on an automated basis.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So that's where agentic starts coming in. So that can just be one of the agents that's talking to the other agents.
Indeed.
So that
and they're all
becomes
just
quite
sitting there
interesting.
conspiring behind your back.
Exactly. Yeah. Simon said this. No, I didn't.
There you go. Yeah, and then you'll suddenly log in, and the machines will go, "Yeah, Scott, we've had a big chat, and we've sorted everything out. And bad news is
Here's
you're
your
not
feeding
P35. Yeah.
sling your rook."
So back to the point. Oh, I've lost my thread.
Oh.
No, GPU as a service.
Yeah.
So if somebody really wants to refine a model, right, or train their own model, the likelihood that they're going to, especially a telco, invest in building all of that infrastructure to do that, and with the frequency that they're going to want to do it, that investment's not worthwhile. But actually, we've got the likes of, all over Europe, people are building these GPU as a service capabilities. You've got people like Nscale. There was the other one, Carbon something AI. And, we've seen DCAI in Denmark.
CoreWeave's one, isn't it, from the US?
CoreWeave is, I was avoiding the US ones.
In the name of sovereignty.
In the name of sovereignty.
But they are. They're the big ones, aren't they? Because their share price has gone like that.
If you're familiar with them. But, there's a lot of these kind of sovereign companies starting up.
Look at CoreWeave share price.
Oh, well.
Because you've just mentioned them, they're going to go even higher now.
I don't think I have that much power, unfortunately.
Someone who I won't name did once tell us that
unless I'm writing about RAN vendors,
Ian's writing has share price implications. It's pretty good. It's not NVIDIA level, but it's about tripled.
But what are you
That's
looking
not
at
bad.
since it listed?
I'm looking at what.
Ago.
Well, Google Finance sometimes doesn't give you a very long.
But I think
range.
CoreWeave only listed about 6 months ago.
Oh, okay. To be fair to them,
and so they've gone up 3
so they
times.
start at about 50, and they're they've leveled it. They're about 120. So you're getting about 2.5 times your money.
Yeah.
Believe me, it's a good thing.
They're not a GPU maker. They're a GPU as a service cloud provider.
Exactly.
So
in fact, it's up 200%. So it's
one of the
3 times your money.
interesting ones is actually NVIDIA launching DGX Cloud Lepton. Have you heard of that?
No.
So it's effectively going to be the marketplace, right, where you can go and consume NVIDIA capacity,
right,
but on somebody else's infrastructure. So, the benefit of that is you can go and kind of pick and choose, try and get the best price for what you want to do. And also it could be quite short-lived, right? So, I want to go and train for a period of time. I can go and do that, get the best price possible, do it for a period, and then pull all my data back. I've got my trained model. I can then implement that for inference. Or you can go to, the likes of Scaleway, CoreWeave, and others. And certainly I think one of the things that we like to try and do is if we're helping the big customers build their AI factories, their GPU as a service clusters, is bridge that gap, right? We're talking to them, we're helping them build their infrastructure. On the other hand, if we've got a customer who's looking for the best way to solve the problem, we can join the dots and help provide that linkage and say, actually, we know these guys have got sovereign capabilities, they're doing this is the way they're approaching things. We know that their security is good because, we might be involved in putting the security in place or somebody else's.
Yeah.
But, so we know that that's a safe haven, if you like, for your data.
Do you need GPUs to do inference?
I think it depends on. So that's another area where it depends on the use case, the volume of users, and the volume of transactions.
Right.
And this is probably one of the biggest challenges with AI is actual sizing. Right. What is the infrastructure you need? So one of our advantages at WWT is we have. It's in the US, but we have, I can't remember how many data centers, but around St. Louis, which is where our HQ is, we have multi-billion-dollar investment in infrastructure, and we have something called our AI Proving Ground. So our customers, we can bring their applications to our Proving Ground and help them size it so that they know what they need to buy.
Right.
So
Seems very useful.
So you only buy what you need rather than, or you buy enough for what you need now, plus, where we think it's going to go in the next year or two.
And that makes total sense. It's also a good idea. I mean, this could be a very obsolete perception, but I remember probably decades ago, some SIs had a bit of a reputation for sort of upselling certain key technological partners. And maybe that's an obsolete thing. Maybe it was unfair at the time. I don't know. I'm not going to substantiate it. I'm certainly not going to name any SIs and risk getting sued by them. But
maybe when we're finished.
Yeah. But it strikes me that if there was any basis to that, and if I heard about it, it must have been quite widespread because I'm not that very deeply embedded, that for that reason as well as all the other reasons you just stated, like best practice, it's important to show your customers that you're always trying to get the best, the most efficient, the most economical, the best fit deal for them from their technological infrastructure. So that makes sense from that basis as well.
But you would have, to what you were saying about the proving grounds, you would have instances where somebody would be able to do inferencing if it was not, a huge sort of volume on a CPU, for instance, maybe, or another type of chip. Yeah.
Or just their regular private sort of server situation.
You certainly can.
Yeah.
There's there are use cases published.
Yeah.
That I may have been involved in at previous employers, where we did inference on pretty low power devices. So it is possible. It all depends on, the volume of transactions, the type of job you're trying to do, and therefore how you need to dimension it. But as soon as you start thinking, I think realistically, if you're going to use Gen AI, you kind of almost automatically need a GPU because of the way it works, right? It's quite hard to get any real practical use out of a CPU using an LLM.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? There's the LLM training and stuff.
So it's quite interesting what happens though with the LLMs. So, the challenge with LLMs is every week, if you go and talk to somebody, there's been another one released or there's been a new quantization method applied to the LLM that changes the way it performs and the way it is handled. It's almost impossible to keep pace.
Yeah.
And again, this is why we have this proving ground is, well, if you want to know which one you want to use and how to fine tune it, that's the right place to do it. Which is what you've got all the right people there.
Which is what a technological partner should be there. It should be there to just say, look, I know it's bewildering. We've got boffins who are all over this shit. Leave it with us. Which totally makes sense. By the way, I was just looking, while I was looking at share prices, I was looking at Nvidia's. So you buy Nvidia shares 2023, you got 10 times your money now. Mm. And even they had a dip. I didn't track why it was, but in April of this year they had quite.
Well, I know what it was.
The tariffs.
Yeah.
It was the tariffs.
Everybody's share price chart looks like that.
Okay, sorry. Well,
I'm going to eat more bacon.
You're going to eat more bacon or tart, you nutter. So yes, because of the tariffs, they went down quite a lot. But so if you bought at that trough, which was April the 4th, you've still almost doubled your money just from April the 4th. So that's how volatile their share prices as well.
No,
you tell me. No. I've got one last thing, and then we're going to have to move on because we're running out of time. And Ian, I don't know. We've got about 40 minutes left, so let me know if you want a break or you're going to power through. You kind of touched on this, but I just want to finish off on it. And I mentioned that study about how enterprise AI implementations are often not working because they're not bespoke enough, and they haven't trained. They haven't sort of, I don't know what the correct word is, but they haven't trained the LLM again on local relevant data. It's just this massive amount of data that they're all learning in these big NVIDIA powered data centers. Is that something? And you may have touched on this, forgive me if you have, but is that something that you get involved in? I.e., let's say it could be a telco, and for that, and for the Gen AI and the various other flavors of AI to work best on them, it has to be tapping into all the amazing amount of data that's telco specific and is specific to that company and its customers and all that sort of thing. Do you get involved in like the retraining of LLMs to make them specific for the customer?
We can certainly do that. We have. I love that term, boffins. We have the boffins who are a lot smarter than me, who can do a lot of this stuff. And yes, I think a lot of the work that we do with, and we like to talk about NVIDIA a lot because of the hype with them. But a lot of the stuff that they talk about as well is, when to do things as well. When do you need to retrain? Or can you just get away with doing some minor tweaks? using things like low-ranking adapters and stuff like that, which don't ask me to explain because you need the boffins to explain
Right,
it.
okay.
But,
All right, I'll let you off the hook on that.
But, this kind of stuff, you can effectively what you can do is you can apply some parameters to tweak an LLM without doing too much work. Whereas retraining an LLM takes a lot more work.
Yeah.
And then, it's about what's the right level of investment to get the right
That's
result.
right. And if you are looking to retrain, you probably do need to make a bigger investment in the actual infrastructure and the GPUs and that sort of thing. And if not, then you don't.
I think it depends on the frequency. So if your data is changing on a, dramatic basis quite frequently, then yes, you're going to need the infrastructure because you're going to be retraining quite frequently. If the kind of data that you're dealing with is reasonably, I wouldn't say static, but follows similar patterns and so on, then you're not going to be retraining on a frequent basis. So actually,
telcos is not going to be retrained a lot.
If you think about it, one of the things we looked at was actual, things like, could we use AI to help with things like 3GPP compliance?
Right.
The standards don't change very often.
Yeah.
So you don't need to retrain on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So it's a great example of, something that doesn't really change that often, but you can feed it data that's changing, but it's, the thing that it's measuring against doesn't change.
Yeah.
So it's really good to train, on a GPU as a service type environment, bring the LLM back and use it for inference.
Have you seen any telcos doing, because I know they talk about fine tuning LLMs, but actually doing, and they all go, we don't want to get into doing large language models, but people seem to be talking more nowadays about small language models, don't they? It's even come up in like Economist articles. And are there telcos sort of getting involved in getting a bit more sort of hands-on in that sort of area?
There are, but more, as far as I'm aware, more out in sort of Far East. But,
doesn't surprise me.
Those are the, those areas, they do have a tendency to be a lot more R&D oriented in the telco, right? And they will play around with it. And I think what will be interesting is, I think for Europe, I always look at Scandinavia. I think the Scandinavian operators are quite innovative in terms of
at least
market
these
offerings
kinds of guys. Yeah.
And monitor what those guys do and see how that evolves. Certainly, as we start seeing some of the kind of big AI infrastructure being built out in Scandinavia.
I remember Elisa were the first ones I heard talking about dark NOCs and as they call it, and like zero touch network operation centers, and you've basically just got one guy who gets woken up at 2 a.m. with a call that everything's gone to
that shit in the morning thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but otherwise,
one guy trying to fix a network that the AI can't fix. It's like,
yeah.
I wish I hadn't got mashed last night. He's saying to himself.
Which is all there is to do, obviously, in Finland anyway.
Yes.
All go to the sauna.
Well, indeed. I know we were just up in northern Finland, and it was actually really nice. It was a day like this. It was really sunny. And I was going, it's nice up here. And some Finn gravely said to me, yeah, don't worry. It gets real gloomy for a long time, and it gets dark at about 3 p.m. or something.
Yeah, well, when I was there 2 years earlier, it was in November, and it was always sort of gloomy, and it was about -12 as well.
So I mean, the shortest day is December the 21st, so that must be like a 4-hour day or something for them.
I always used to laugh that if you fly to Helsinki, right, the airport name is or code is hell.
Yeah.
And if you're flying there in the middle of winter, it's pretty dark.
No, I missed that winter one. I mean, I would have found it quite novel just to experience the sort of cold snowiness of it all, but I don't think I could.
You wouldn't have enjoyed it as
done
much.
It as a lifestyle choice.
There was more whiskey being drunk on the winter one.
There's that.
There was, it was more pleasant this time, I think.
Okay, we've only got about half an hour left, so I'm going to pivot away. Have we covered a lot of the stuff that you had in mind, Simon?
I'm just scanning my notes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I think it's been
cool.
good.
I mean, we've kind of touched on it already, so I don't want to spend too long on it. But to justify calling it a middle segment, these big investment announcements that have come out this week, I haven't written them up. Colleagues of mine have. And it's all been to do with Trump's great big royal visit, where he comes over and we all kowtow, and he gets to...
Sadiq Khan wasn't allowed, apparently.
No, because he doesn't like him, because he slagged him off once. I mean, that's how...
I think there's mutual slagging,
capricious he is. Yeah, well, I'm sure it's mutual. And that's fine. You know, we don't have the time, and I don't have the inclination to get into a big sort of Trumpy tangent. But
Really?
well, we haven't got long.
You
mate.
love that normally.
Well, I'm sure we'll touch on it. No, but I mean, it's just so it's redundant. It's so baked in. People know what he's like. But the reason I mention him is because wherever he goes, things do happen. You might not like them, but he does make things happen. He comes over to the UK and he has an entourage, and he's got people like Jensen Huang hanging around with him. And then lo and behold, we've got hundreds of billions of dollars suddenly being pledged.
Well, it was all choreographed, wasn't it?
Yes,
obviously?
totally. No, I completely concede that. And how much of it ends up getting spent is another matter, because it's easy to pledge, isn't it?
The tech bros used to hate him, but now they all love him, don't they?
Yeah, because they're pragmatic and they realise,
exactly. Well,
yeah, they got to play the
get
game.
money, and
Yeah, they got to play the game, and there's all sorts of weird things going on. I mean, on my area of interest, like digital civil liberties, there's all kinds of bizarre censorship going on over there. There's this comedian and late night show host called Jimmy Kimmel.
So you are going to talk about Trump?
Yeah, I know. Well, you lured me into it, Ian. This is current. No, I just didn't want to have a general. It's very hackneyed to talk about Trump in general. He's a known quantity. That's all. But yes, this guy called Jimmy Kimmel, his show got suspended by, I think the network's called ABC, but it's owned by Disney. And anyway, and actually there is a sort of vaguely telecoms relevant tangent, because it came immediately after the head of the FCC in the States, a chap called Brendan Carr, just came out with some very Trumpy stuff about how he's out of order and he should be sacked and all that kind of stuff. And then lo and behold, as soon as he says that, they cut his show off. So there's some really dodgy shit going on.
Journalist on LinkedIn who'd apparently texted Brendan Carr directly for a comment on the Jimmy Kimmel situation, and the response he got was this is on that text messaging was a photo of a Muppet on fire.
Right, and then another one. I saw another one, which was a GIF,
which is a bizarre thing
GIF
for
from
the
people
FCC
high-fiving each other in the office.
Right,
they've all become Trumpified.
Yes,
I think Carr was halfway there, to be fair. But anyway, that tangent aside, I'm certainly not going to ask you. I mean, you work for a US company. I'm not going to put you in the awkward position asking you to comment on Trump and all that sort of thing. But more substantively, do you have any initial impression on all these big announcements that have come out this week about massive US inward investment in the UK, which seems to be mainly in the sort of AI data center kind of space?
I'll start off with a bit of an anecdote. So we talked earlier about AI and how much power it needs. And the fact is that 2 days running, my trains have been completely obliterated because of power problems.
Really?
So,
where do you come in from?
Reading.
Right.
Into Paddington. And so last night there was a power problem. Paddington was an absolute disaster.
Oh, my God.
And
for people listening from around the world, Paddington doesn't just serve Reading, it serves the whole west of England, basically.
Yeah, it's not just famous for a
bear.
Although there is a statue of the bear.
He probably came in from...
a statue now of the bear?
He probably came in from Bristol or something. I don't know why he got his name. But he arrived at Paddington for some reason. I assume he came from the West Country.
Must have done. There's also a statue of Brunel at Paddington Station as well.
Yeah.
So it's quite a cool station.
Well, at least he's a real person.
But rather than a bear.
Not a fucking talking bear.
I don't know how to follow that.
A statue of Harry Potter or something.
As you were, Simon.
So I think, we need to sort out our power, right? The cost of power in this country is crazy.
Yeah.
And, I think it's great on the one hand that we're getting the investment. I think Jensen Huang, it was great to see him in a suit.
He wasn't in his leather jacket.
He wasn't in his leather jacket.
Well, because Trump's got a thing about it. He told off Zelensky, didn't he?
Exactly.
He makes the effort, Scott.
Well, it's only because he didn't want to get humiliated like Zelensky did.
Yeah.
But, Jensen, basically spoke about the UK and, especially in the sphere of AI, and said, we're currently, I think, third in the world behind the US and Germany. Now, I really want the investment to be higher, quite frankly, because I don't like losing to Germany.
Right.
At least with AI, we can't lose on penalties.
I think historically the Brits will back you up on that one. Right?
Well, and the Americans hopefully too, right?
Very much so, yeah.
But all joking aside, I think it is it is great for the industry to see this investment. I do think that we've got a great amount of smart people in this country, you know, especially around academia, that we can leverage to reinvigorate industry and stimulate AI startups. That's what we want to see is an evolution of startups. I'd love to see some startups come out that can use AI for good as well, right? You know, rather than the kind of dystopian future that you talked about, but how can we leverage AI to improve things, you know? And, you know, we talked earlier, I think, about sort of, I think there's applications around drug discovery, medicine, and so on. So for those
pharma is a real strength of ours, isn't it?
Yes.
GSK and all that.
And why not? Why not use this infrastructure and this investment to accelerate that?
Nuclear fusion.
Well, that could actually be the answer.
AI
to
could be, if it was self-aware, be like, I need this to power myself. So,
so I'm going to invent it.
Yeah, I'm going to crack the.
That would be amazing.
Well, that's the positive side of AI, I suppose, isn't it? Because we always talk about the dystopian aspect of it. But if you talk to someone like Sam Altman, he'd go, well, what if it could come up with a perpetual energy source that, you know, or like an Ian Banks sort of style vision of a post-scarcity kind of world where everybody's provided for, and you know, that's that kind of utopian side.
Or a cure for cancer.
Or a cure for cancer or something, exactly.
Or Parkinson's or something like that, right? You know, so these are the kinds of things where, that's fantastic. I think for us, it will be great. I think it's quite interesting to see some of the announcements. But again, some of the challenges are, you know, some of those announcements were around the kind of companies that, you know, when we talk about sovereignty, we have a challenge.
Yes.
So we need to make sure that we balance the fanfare of this is great with, okay, how do we make it practical? How do we make it so that it adheres to our common values, right?
Yeah, and I guess if you're going to go down the sort of national perspective, you know, if all the investment is from US companies, they're going to be ultimately, to use sort of more sort of, I suppose, lefty terminology, they're going to be the ones, he's giving us some fresh air, ultimately reaping the rewards of the sort of surplus value from it all, whereas we're just employees. But I mean, a point you made about entrepreneurism and all that sort of thing, that the UK's got a very bad reputation. Certainly when I speak to people who are in the world where they're looking to raise money or be entrepreneurs, they always say what a shitty environment it is for that sort of thing compared to the States, just in terms of access to capital, in terms of regulation, in terms of lots of things where they feel there are less impediments in the US. So I personally welcome that side of it. If we have closer ties with the US, which we should, because obviously we got the cultural and the language and all that sort of thing, I would have thought the UK would be the first port of call for Americans looking to access Europe just for language alone. That if that means that we end up being a bit more entrepreneurial and all that sort of thing, then great. But what I remain to be convinced of, you know, we have all these set piece bits where Starmer's sitting there looking all uncomfortable next to Trump, who's lording it over everyone, and he's thinking, how can I get through today without getting humiliated? But will our, this is a bit of a tangent, but will our political class ever take some of that culturally on board and lower regulations and just make innovation a bit easier? Because I'm not too optimistic about that myself.
It's a big British challenge, I would say. So when I lived in the US, I think one of the biggest differences that I found with the kind of people that I was interacting with was, you know, Americans have a much more have a go,
can do.
What's the worst that can happen attitude. And I don't mean that they're going to take ridiculous risks, but there is a lot more willingness to take risks, whereas here in this country, we're so conservative about risk that actually it's like, you know, it hinders us and inhibits us from that entrepreneurial kind of capability that we actually have in the country, but we're inhibited by our upbringing and you know, the way we've kind of evolved, I guess.
That's why there's more base jumpers in the US than there are in the UK.
Yeah, well, count me out of that.
So
no, I
UK
hear
is
you.
very flat as well.
I hear you. I think we're all speaking with a common voice. In the time we got left, talking about innovation and all that sort of thing, a little bit of a tangent onto another bit of news that came out this week, which is this time from Meta. formerly known as Facebook and still owner of. And there is a telecoms angle on this as well. But they announced our headline written by Nick. It was quite a funny headline. Actually, it took me by surprise. I had to look up the terminology he used. He said, Meta and Ray-Ban risk spawning a new generation of glass holes. And I was thinking, at first I was thinking, Nick, I mean, he's got a really good sense of humour and he's really clued up. And sometimes, and I totally empower our freelancers to just go, fuck it, right, what you know, take your own angle on it. And I thought, you know, was he just feeling especially sort of leery when he wrote that? But no, glass holes is actually a phrase that first came along from the previous generations of these, what are being called AI glasses. I think we used to call them smart glasses or connected glasses or whatever, but they're being called AI glasses because, as we know, AI has to be attached to absolutely everything.
It takes you into the Terminator, basically. You get like a
well, indeed.
display in the bottom of your...
Exactly. So you've got back to Terminator. I was like, I told you we would. So you got glasses like the ones I'm wearing, although they're a lot thicker rimmed, which I think is something that's worth flagging up. But not only do they have an outward-facing camera, which is, by the way, where this phrase glass holes was originally coined, is people going around with these cameras just invading people's privacy. You know, I mean, you know that you got a camera on you now, but you signed up for it, and that's fine. But if you're just sitting at the pub later, and I've got glasses that are recording everything you're saying, supposedly, I mean, for journalists, that would be mad. I haven't even thought about the ethical implications.
Well, I don't have a little light that comes on the metal ones. Yeah.
There are a lot of guys who use it at the beach to film women.
Yeah, well,
really
that's pretty dodgy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yes, so they would be called glass holes, I guess. They're perhaps a classic example of it.
And it makes you speak with an Austrian accent as well, apparently.
And it makes you say, I'll be back the whole time. But that's the reason Nick went with this angle, is there's these new ones coming out. So as you said, they've got this heads-up display, which is like a semi-transparent display on the inside of the screen, like you imagine fighter pilots have or whatever in modern planes.
Yeah.
And you're constantly going around.
I don't know, I've never been there, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, but you've probably seen Top Gun or
it's
something.
like Google Glass was
real?
like 10 plus years ago.
A lot of cars have heads-up display, right? For sat-nav and speed limit and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Is that quite common in cars now?
Not
fancy ones.
Not Nissan Notes don't.
Okay, cars are one of my passions. So yeah.
And not a 10-year-old Ford Focus either.
It's beyond the tachometer. It shines on the windshield. Yeah.
So it's a projection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. No. And I just because I don't have personal experience of it, I'm not surprised. That's obviously the direction of travel. And so you get these in these glasses, and that's why Nick went with that angle. And so I completely get. I was perfectly happy with him to lead on the privacy side of things, and that is a real issue, and it's not one that's going to go away. And as Ian just pointed out, I think at least having some clear like red LED that lights up when it's recording information.
It's almost like they've anticipated regulation.
Yeah. Well, that should be regulated.
They don't want to backlash against them, obviously saying that blokes on the beach are using it to look at women. I didn't even know that was a thing, that you put your smart glasses on to record.
No, because
it
would never occur to you because you're not like that.
No, I'm not like that. But they've obviously anticipated it. And then maybe it would be regulated in future that you have to sort of indicate when you're actually wearing them and recording. But it's not a mass market device.
Well, actually, and you talk about the beach context, if it's just a tiny little red LED, I mean, that works in a face-to-face environment like this. But if you
maybe it should sound a siren
clocking people are like 10 meters away, it doesn't work. So
Sharpie over it.
Yeah, or just a big as you say, a siren that just says "perv alert" or something like that. But they are interesting things, and then leaving aside the more contentious sides of it, you can see how it's useful. Like we're going to New York next week. I've never been to New York before. I'm really looking forward to it. I know so much about it through like fiction and documentaries and that sort of thing. And it's a bit of a pain in the arse if you're getting to know a new place. I mean, Google Maps is incredibly useful, but it's a bit of a pain in the arse looking down there. And I've heard that the crime situation in New York's a bit moody. I don't necessarily want to be waving my phone.
It's pretty moody around London, isn't it?
I don't think it's very bad.
It's about London levels.
I think you were hearing that from somebody in Finland. He was a bit down on.
Oh yes, stuff. Oh yes, of course. I remember now.
I don't want to.
Maybe it's London levels, and I'm a Londoner, so I certainly shouldn't be intimidated. But nonetheless, take care. If I'm sitting there walking around like that, I am a bit of a sort of.
You look like a tourist, don't you?
Yeah, quite.
Right, which makes you a prime target. And I was actually thinking exactly the same thing. I was coming here today. It's the first time I've walked here from Waterloo, and I was I'm walking around like that, looking at my
Yeah,
phone
yeah.
and kind of thinking, actually, that is one use where I
That'd be
can
really
see the
handy.
value, right? It's this augmented reality.
And it
kind
doesn't
of-
need to be
Yeah,
constantly up
exactly.
there. Just every now and then an arrow will come up and go,
we're gonna
take a left here.
start seeing people snatch glasses of you.
Well, there is that, isn't there? I
In
guess
your
everyone
hand-
will have those little straps.
In your
around the
hand,
back.
you can squeeze at least. On your face, it's gone. Coming from behind.
Yeah, but there's probably ways of like there's probably some guard that you can have to make it.
But then you're wearing
impossible
that.
to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
chain.
But, well, look, if you're gonna so inclined to grab phones off people, then
I'm not, I'm
you
just
know,
saying.
it's-
So another interesting technological part of this is they're called Meta Ray-Ban display is the product name, is they come with a wristband,
Yeah,
which is partly where the connectivity is. So that offloads some of the computational burden from the frames,
yeah,
which I think we all agree are a bit on the thick side as it is. But it also has these sensors which I think detect your little tendons in your wrist,
right.
so that you can actually control the display through hand gestures
It's mostly through cameras, though. Like it
for
looks
zoom
at
and stuff,
no, as in it looks at your hand shape. It's not really from the tendon thing.
isn't it? Oh, I thought I read that. Okay, all right, I might be talking shit. Either way,
Never.
it's a way. Yes, for the first time ever.
It's also $800.
But that's getting closer to.
Yeah.
Anything sub 4 figures is something that most normal people can consider
That's an
buying.
iPhone.
Can you
for
watch- Yeah,
2000
it is.
now, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Can you watch
Exactly.
a video on it?
I thought the price was pretty
I don't know.
reasonable, personally.
Yeah.
but I'm not saying
And so,
that's again.
so if it gets to a time where you can buy one of these things for, let's say, 500 quid,
subsidised by a telco,
and anyone who isn't completely skint could consider it for a Christmas present or something.
or pay as you go, the pay as
Yeah,
you
or as part
pay
of the
on a monthly
bundle.
plan,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
could be
3 years.
finally a
quid
bit of
month.
ARPU uplift, maybe.
45%
No.
interest.
I don't see any ARPU uplift.
Oh, okay. Or just bundling sometimes.
I mean, I share your scepticism about the answer that we got in Finland when we asked about like 6G AI related business models for
Right.
telcos, and it's like, well, we
Yes.
need to figure out a way of including
Tommy,
some
we
of
can
this.
say that.
AI.
Tommy said that on the record.
Yeah, he did, but
Yeah.
but I think that's a real tough one for the telcos.
Yeah.
Is actually monetizing some of this stuff.
So the other telco angle on this is we've spoken about this loads on the pod, especially when William Webb comes on, talking about the growth curve for mobile traffic and how certain vendors, especially Ericsson, are sort of pinning a lot of their outlook on that growth continuing, whereas there are lots of signs, and I'm sympathetic to William's position, that it's a S-curve that's levelling off, because the natural, from what's available now, the natural consumption rates have reached a sort of peak. Video is the main driver for mobile traffic. There's only so much even someone who hasn't got a job or whatever can communicate when it can consume in mobile video data, given that most of it's at home
Well,
on
I
Wi-Fi
think
networks.
Apparently,
anyway.
you can watch videos. On
And
the-
I'll quickly finish here and then to your point. So a lot of people are thinking maybe if everyone's going around with these connected glasses the whole time, that are not only downloading information of your environment and all that sort of thing, but maybe uploading video or just communicating with the cloud, maybe that's going to be another traffic driver. What are you gonna
That's
say?
the big sort of hope, I think, from Nokia and probably for Ericsson as well, is like the impact it might have on uplink, and is that a driver then of people buying more equipment from them? And William's sceptical about that because I've talked to him about it, because he still thinks that you're probably only going to be, battery life's an issue. You probably
Certainly is. I think these are only 6 hours.
You're probably only going to be using it for a little bit of the day to do that sort of, whether that's a use case anyway to actually have traffic uploaded from the glasses to the cloud is uncertain. But if you are doing it, it might only be a small part of the day. For a long time, they're probably not going to be mass market devices. And then you've still got this thing at the end of the day where there's a finite amount of it that can be done, and if you're doing it on glasses, you're probably not using some smartphone services that you might have been using before.
That's
You're
true.
sort of
So
substituting one
there's
for
the
the
sort
other.
of cannibalization thing.
But I think the big problem for them is sort of how a telco maybe monetizes it. It's like, it'd be nice to think that, like, let's say these things take off, that Meta and other companies will do, and everybody suddenly decides they want to go out and get glasses, and if telcos are able to charge a separate subscription fee for that, then that's like twice the ARPU that you were getting before. 3 or someone will come along and go, we're bundling
Who's going to get a separate smart
we're bundling it
glasses
with your smartphone, 30 quid a month.
That'll be the usual race to the bottom.
Totally.
And I was just thinking, you're talking about the usage. Just got images of people constantly looking like Michael Caine out of the 60s going, hold on a minute.
Yeah, but
I'll get my
that's a good
glasses
thing.
on.
Not bad.
Yeah.
That's better than your Mancunian one.
Which isn't saying much. Simon, do you have any thoughts either as a consumer or from inside the sort of telco insider perspective on these new AI glasses?
Unfortunately, Ian's kind of stolen what I was going to say.
Oh, right. Okay.
No, it's fine. So I agree. I think if you're transmitting with glasses, are you really going to be watching something, right? So are we just flipping from certain users? Because, as you said, right, is it really going to be mass market? It's probably not in the short term anyway. But does that mean that when somebody's out and about, they're not watching a video, you know, they're transmitting instead? But to the other point, most video is consumed off Wi-Fi anyway, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's the other issue.
I know we had this discussion earlier about the kind of analysts that we all follow and enjoy looking at these kind of predicted growth curves.
Well, Dean wouldn't mind us mentioning his name because he's been on this loads of times, and I know he's sceptical about this
Dean
sort of
Bubley,
thing. Dean Bubley's pretty sceptical about this sort of stuff, this sort of idea that you would... there are some analysts who I won't name who have this vision that in the future we'll all be walking around with these, and it'll be constantly like uploading what we see to the cloud and feeding back recommendations to us, like, oh, you should go in this restaurant here and take advantage of this, and it's all quite sci-fi, and I can't.
But
quite
location-based services, I remember writing about location-based services like 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, but it'd be quite a sophisticated vision of that.
Yeah, it's a new manifestation.
Yeah,
of it. Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, you're in this area, go to this restaurant, which is almost what you get with Google Maps now, frankly. Like,
Indeed, and then you're
more
deeply. Do you ever find that when I think Google? One of the things that winds me up about Google Maps is what is flagged up is very selective.
Yeah,
it could be a restaurant you know is there, and it won't come up on Google Maps. It's presumably because they haven't fucking bribed them to come up on.
It's really weird, even if you've like clicked on them before because you've I
don't
find
like
that
that.
really
I
odd.
don't like that.
There's one feature that's interesting on the glasses because Apple released translation live with the AirPods, so it's audio.
So specific AirPods, you need specific devices, and you need the latest iOS.
Yeah, I think it's up to like the last 2 generations of iPhone. So if you don't have that, How many people do, right? I know a lot of people move, but it's not that many.
But which of you's on one that's about 8 years old?
No,
I'm on a 14, but it's not that old.
I'm on a 15.
Oh, right.
But anyway,
I was thinking someone else.
I'm a 14, which doesn't support it, but my iPad does,
right?
Because it's an M model iPad.
But the Meta glasses, it's subtitles. That could be kind of cool. Somebody talks to you in like Chinese, and it shows on your screen what they're saying. That's pretty cool. But then when you speak, then
there's that. That was Apple included that in its latest. What do they call them? iPod? No, what are those?
That's what I just said.
AirPods. Oh, I thought you were talking. Sorry, I thought you were talking about the glasses still.
No. I said Apple released that, and then the glasses can
You can do it in a visual. Right. Sorry, I've caught up with you. Yeah. And
go back to doing your Michael Caine accent.
But one more thing.
I guess just like the Apple one, if you're both wearing AirPods, you need to both wear glasses.
I do love all that live translation stuff, though. Sorry,
I think it's great, but the challenge with the Apple stuff is it's very limited in languages, right? I think it's French, Spanish.
For now, yeah. It's presumably the same for Meta. But the Meta has an advantage is that I guess it's the opposite for AirPods. If you're blind, you can use the AirPods, but if you're deaf, you can use the glasses. And you can hear or see what people say.
Well, I think for all our dystopian talk, I think if AI completely eradicates language barriers, I mean, that's a fucking good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, then no one can bother learning another language. Yeah. That'll be even
well, that's just English people, isn't it? We don't bother anyway. We talk English, don't we?
As well as not writing books.
What else do we fucking need?
Music. We can stop learning languages.
You'll spot the English tourist, the English-speaking tourist from a mile away for the glasses and the AirPods.
Yeah.
It's like...
and then you get, like we were talking about Google Maps being selective about what stuff it flags up. Then pivoting back to more dystopian, you get things of like, is it a pure translation or is there a commercial element to it? Does it start? Or it could be like that Charlie Brooker thing where the woman just suddenly starts blurting out ads.
Or like the translation of the
brain implant.
You go to a restaurant and the translation of the reviews are very much more positive than they are. Yeah.
Have you seen that one, that Black Mirror one? It's a very they're all pretty dystopian, but she has a brain tumour, and they say, well, there's one experimental procedure where we can operate, and they basically take out the tumour and put something else in that's linked to the cloud, They clone her brain and put this thing in, and then she can only stay with.
But it's a
subscription service. So it's like you pay for as a subscription service. Then she finds out that if she goes outside this area that she lives in, she starts to sort of go into like
Glitch.
fit, and suddenly she starts blurting out adverts in the middle of the classroom. She's a teacher,
and then they give her the option. The way it's dystopian, they give her the option of not having the ads if she upgrades to a premium service.
Yeah. And
then over the course of the episode, they're constantly upselling her.
Yeah.
And so basically, she's because she's subscribed to this thing, and because she's got, I guess, to use a sort of term that we use, vendor lock-in.
Yep.
She can't escape from it, and they can keep upselling her forever.
Is this linked somehow to like Elon's Neuralink thing?
Yes, I guess so, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're probably playing on that, but
I mean, the broader thing, in common with a lot of things we've been chatting about on this pod and we have on previous ones, is just that, when you go into a partnership with anyone, any commercial enterprise, there are terms and conditions, there's contracts, there's all that sort of thing. But each protagonist, and this is where I sort of commended you from what you were saying earlier from an SI's point of view of how you've got to be striving to give your customers the best possible deal, because each protagonist is looking to optimize that arrangement for themselves. That's fine, that's human nature. Although some of my lefty mates would argue that's not human nature and it's the system that has imposed that will on us. I don't agree with them, by the way. But that's human nature as it currently manifests itself. And the more dependent you become on a third party, the more potential there is for that third party to abuse that power imbalance to their benefit and your detriment. So that's where I get a little bit dystopian about this stuff. Yeah. But then again, you can't, you've got to get into partnerships. You can't be completely self-reliant. You have to buy products. You have to buy services. You have to get involved with other people whose specialization is outside of yours.
So, there wasn't a lot of the meta update. There wasn't a lot about the metaverse, was there? Was there?
No, not really.
I thought they might try and do something like this.
That's
and
on hold.
Very much to what? Yeah, I know it, but everybody's talked about that. But their thing is like they've not really given up on it, and
they're going to change their name to Bloody Glasses. Because that's what they do every time a new fad comes along. Mark Zuckerberg changes the fucking name of the company, isn't they? Yeah. So yeah, we're nearly out of time. They're probably going to threaten to chuck us out of the office soon. Does anyone, Simon especially, do you have any last thoughts either about that last segment we were talking about with the glasses or anything we've spoken about just before we call it a day?
I think just on your point about partnerships, I think one of the things you've got to have in partnerships is trust, right? And as soon as trust goes, it's impossible to rebuild. So fundamentally, that's life and business all summed up in one, right? We all have to interact with each other. We have to, we form relationships and build trust. But if that trust goes, fundamentally things fall apart and you can't progress.
And I don't think you can fake it. I think you have to be authentic. You could probably get away with faking it, blagging it, conning your business partner for a little while. But sooner or later it'll catch up with you. So I think a far better starting point is just to be transparent and honest and upfront from the off.
I agree. I think I've always, personally, I've always tried to do that. Hopefully I've succeeded, but, I don't think I've been ever, kind of caught out in a big way because I've, told something that certainly not because I've told something that I knew wasn't true, because in my professional life, that's just not worth the risk, right?
Yeah.
And you quickly lose like that trust and that capability to do business. And for me, what I found in my tenure in telecoms is, strangely, although it's a global business, it is a really small world.
Yes.
And so many people are interconnected. So when you go somewhere, you find, for example, we talk about VMO2. There was G New York had a CTO event. I can't remember how long ago, a few months back. And I turned up there, and the number of people that I knew in the room was phenomenal.
It's quite a community.
I've worked with
we get a lot of that from doing this pod. Actually, when we go to an event and we realise that, or even just interactions on LinkedIn, we realise it's quite a little community, and hopefully this podcast is one small contributor to that. But yeah, it's definitely, even though it's a global, massive industry, there's a lot of familiar faces. Yeah. It's cool. I quite like that, because I wasn't until I got this job 11 years ago. I wasn't a sort of telecoms person. I was more sort of general tech journalist. And and there's some parts of the telecoms industry which, it's not the sexiest industry right now compared to, I don't know, AI or whatever. and the growth levels are single figures, and so a lot of people aren't that bothered. But it's still really big, and it's still really central. You look at half the ads that you'll see knocking about the place are from operators.
Well, it's adjacent to tech, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and more so than shipping or something,
Thank God this isn't the shipping.
People in the shipping industry go, well, actually,
podcast.
we're taking advantage of AI a lot in what we're doing at the moment.
That's true.
So would agriculture is actually really big for IoT, isn't it? All those John Deere tractors.
Well, that's it.
Got more AI in them than anything.
Utilities as well, right?
Yeah.
Sensors, smart sensors, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I take all that back.
But they all need the telcos, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's still very central, but I do agree with you, Simon. It is a distinct community, and it's one I quite like. So cool. Well, that's a good note to end it on. If no one else has got anything to say, thanks a lot for coming in, Simon.
Thank you for having me. Great to meet you guys.
If you've got some time, we traditionally, even though we started an hour earlier today, we traditionally go off to a pub and have a couple or more. So you're both invited if you want. If you've got other things to do, that's fine as well.
I'll wait until you stop recording, then I'll say yes.
Then you'll give me your official answer. Okay, well we'll call it a day there. So we're not doing one next week, are we? Because we're going to be in New York. You're going to have to wait 2 weeks. See if you can cope. But thanks a lot for listening, and make sure you join us for that one.